It is the crime of the 90s, carjacking. Today, meet one carjacker who held a city hostage. Inside Edition, straight ahead. The country is gripped in fear. Carjackers from coast to coast are holding our roadways hostage.
They need a car at that moment. You're parked at the light. They shove the gun in the car and tell you to get the hell out.
Today, the man they call the king of carjacking tells how you can live through the terror.
Just one question.
You gotta go live.
He pulled me over his knee and spanked me. He said that I'd been a bad girl.
She's not talking about her father. She says she got a spanking from her attorney. And some former employees say it wasn't just clients who got pulled over his knee.
He wants you to come back at him and say, yes, I want you to spank me.
An inside look at the man they call the Spanking Lawyer.
Let's go.
Stand by.
Sexy ads are Calvin Klein's obsession, but his new swimwear line may have gone too far. An inside look at how Calvin Klein is turning underwear into beachwear.
2, 1. Hello, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching Inside Edition today. You know, Calvin Klein has always used sex to sell his products, but has he gone too far with his bathing suits? We'll have that report a little later on. But first, our lead story. Carjacking is a frightening crime, and many people are winding up dead. One of the worst cases is in Detroit. A man they call the Carjacking King held that city in his grips as he terrorized dozens of motorists. Cindy Hom with our story.
The automobile, once a safe haven for drivers, is rapidly becoming one of the more dangerous places for people to be. Armed auto thefts, also known as carjackings, have produced a wave of fear in cities across the country.
It seems to be a crime of opportunity. They need a car at that moment. You're parked at the light. They shove the gun in the car and tell you to get the hell out.
In San Diego, just this year, 265 cases have been reported, and recently, one carjacking resulted in 2 deaths. In Baltimore, there were 300 carjackings, Houston, 628 in 1991, and in Detroit, during the summer of '91, there were 205 carjackings in just 21 days.
People always felt somewhat secure in their car, and I think that took the last vestiges of that away from them.
That summer, one man held the city of Detroit hostage. He is 27-year-old Kip Cortez Beasley, known as the Carjacking King. And while he has not killed anyone, he's credited with more than 35 carjackings within a period of 41 days.
A person could be pulling up in their driveway at home. They could be pulling up in a parking lot, in a grocery store parking lot, a beauty salon, It's no process.
Up until his arrest, he had been making a good living as a carjacker. Sometimes he would abandon the car and just take its contents. Other times the car would end up at chop shops where its parts would be sold.
How much money could you get from Mercedes?
Let's say it's a 190, it's a 91 or 92 190, and a guy Mercedes is totaled. Another guy's Mercedes is totaled, okay? A guy may give you $5,000, $10,000 for the Mercedes, you know what I'm saying? Because he can take the whole car and put it on his car.
In November 1991, Beasley began paying the price at Cotton Correctional Facility in Michigan, where he was sentenced to 25 to 40 years.
When your back is pushed up against the wall when you're poor, you're broke, and you don't have any other means, you resort to crime.
His victims have trouble sympathizing with him.
If you have enough intelligence to go out and make a business of robbing, then perhaps you go out and get a job and do something else for yourself instead of taking something from me.
This woman who requested anonymity met up with Beasley August 1st, 1991, while sitting in a car waiting for a friend.
The man came up to the car. He put a gun. My window was part way down. He put a gun in my chest, which seemed like a very big gun at the time to me. Put it into my chest. He told me to get out of the car, which I did.
Beasley took off with the victim's purse, car, and whatever else was in the vehicle.
Even though he was cool and collected, believe me, I was afraid. But it just seemed like it was maybe a job for him, something that he's just done many times.
John Bianco confirms that. He has court records that detail Beasley's busy daily work schedule. One example is August 20th, 1991.
At about 3:30 in the morning, Mr. Beasley came up on a lady who was coming home from work, and she parked her car in her driveway. He pointed the gun, threatened her, drove off in her car.
At 9:30 a.m., Beasley performed another carjacking. He then robbed someone at gunpoint at an automatic teller and at a hair salon where he also took someone hostage. By 10:30 a.m. that morning, he had victimized 6 people.
I can only bring Mr. Beasley up till 10:30 that morning. Now, maybe he went home and rested, and maybe he committed more.
Do you feel any remorse about what happened?
I have apologized publicly for the mental mental stress and emotional stress that I've subjected those people to. I feel bad about it, really.
But he does feel his sentence is much too harsh, almost comparable to that of a murder conviction.
I feel a certain amount of resentment because, again, no one was ever hurt.
But I guess it's the possibility that someone could have been hurt.
Yes, there's always a possibility, but there wasn't. That's what we're dealing with, facts. And the fact is, nobody wasn't. So why should I be subject to a maybe when other people who have committed the same crime I have is getting under 10 years? And then what am I to do when I'm 50, 52, 54, however old I will be when I get out? I mean, what am I to do then? Really?
He should have gotten more. He not only did it to me, he did it to a bunch of other people. He should never even see daylight again. Never.
I feel that a major part of me has been taken away. And they're not only taking my life, they're taking away from my kids.
As far as being away from his children, he took himself away from his children.
Carjackers like Beasley are everywhere. His advice to victims, don't fight with the carjacker. Give up your car. It's not worth your life.
Well, in October, President Bush signed legislation that makes carjacking a federal offense. Top punishment, life in prison. Much more ahead as Inside Edition moves along, including a major scandal in Maryland. Did a prominent lawyer spank his clients?
Before I knew it, he again said that I'd been a bad girl and needed to be spanked, and proceeded to pull me over his knee and again spank me.
Here's a bizarre situation. A successful lawyer in Maryland is involved in an embarrassing scandal. It seems some of his female clients and employees have accused him of spanking them. Scott Rappaport with our story.
He pulled me over his knee and spanked me. He said that I'd been a bad girl and that I needed to be spanked.
What am I going to have to do with you? Am I going to have to spank you? You know, and
these women aren't talking about punishment meted out by a disapproving parent. They are talking about the allegedly outrageous conduct of one of Easton, Maryland's most prominent citizens, attorney George Goldsboro. These and other women who were either employees or clients of his say he spanked some women.
He wants you to come back at him and say, yes, I want you to spank me, or, you know, or that's what you need to do, or, you know, that's what he's looking for. But, you know, you certainly don't want to give him that response.
Because if you do, according to Catherine, Ruth, and others, he will oblige. Perhaps the worst charge involved a then 17-year-old secretary, Sandy Kolakowski. She declined to be interviewed for this story, but has told investigators that Goldsboro first spanked her in his office when he interviewed her for a job. In Sandy's words,
he said if I wanted the job and if I was going to try and he was willing to work with me and teach me, and that involved discipline, which would, you know, ultimately be a spanking.
For the next 22 months, Sandy said that Goldsboro subjected her to regular, sometimes bare-bottom spankings.
This is her first job. She doesn't know any better. She's never been in a workplace. And this man is treating her like he's, you know, trying to discipline her like a father or grandfather, and she doesn't know any better.
It is alleged that Goldsboro's spanking dates back at least to 1979. But no one, including the women involved and other lawyers in his office, did much about the allegations for years.
The attorneys would warn new secretaries that, you know, he may try and make these comments, and that you'd certainly want to say, no way, you know, you're not going to touch me.
Secretary Ruth Thomas says Goldsboro would sometimes pat her bottom as she walked by, but she says she managed to avoid being spanked. Meanwhile, Catherine Schweitzer claims she wasn't so lucky. In 1979, she was standing on this back porch when a deer hunter accidentally shot her, shattering her jaw. During her recovery, she hired George Goldsboro to file a lawsuit. She says he came to her house, and before she knew it, he spanked her.
Certainly I was frightened. There was an element of fear. The actual action upon me was not violent in nature. It wasn't as a spanking that maybe one receives as a child. I don't really know what it was. It was so bizarre, so unexpected, so out of context.
Not knowing how to react, she let it go. But months later, Catherine was in Goldsboro's office when she told him she was engaged to be married.
And I thought he would be happy for me. And then before I knew it, he again said that I'd been a bad girl and needed to be spanked, and proceeded to pull me over his knee and again spank me.
3 years after Catherine's case against the hunter was settled out of court, she says she received a phone call from another attorney in Goldsboro's office.
And he came out with, have you ever been spanked by Mr. Goldsboro? Well, I was pretty shocked that he called me with that, and I said yes.
The lawyer told her that other women had complained about Goldsboro and asked if she would be willing to testify. Catherine agreed, but never heard from the lawyer again. So in 1989, she filed a complaint with the Maryland Attorney Grievance Commission. As the investigation proceeded, Catherine was surprised to learn how many people knew about Goldsboro's alleged conduct.
They didn't begin to investigate it until I filed my complaint. Why did it take so long?
We wondered the same thing, but no one from the law firm, including Goldsboro himself, would agree to an interview. But then Inside Edition producer Carl Sears caught up with him at the courthouse after a hearing before the Grievance Commission.
Yes, we expect to be fully vindicated. Absolutely.
Easton attorney Jane Tolar says the reaction of the legal community went from humor to outrage.
The first reaction is one of those elbow in the ribs, what about George? And then I think people are overcome with this sense of, what has this profession come to?
Goldsboro denies the spanking allegations, but he does admit to being frustrated with his former secretary, Sandy Kolakowski. In a series of notations on office letters, Goldsboro rebuked Sandy for what he called her no-brainer errors, usually typing mistakes. He allegedly made Sandy write this pledge.
If I continue to make stupid, no-brainer mistakes, I will have to stay after school, at which time I will not be wearing my jumpsuit, etc., and I will be turned over Mr. G's knee and spanked until I cannot sit down.
Goldsboro has told investigators that he did spank Sandy just once to get her attention. In his words, she said, my grandfather, when he gets that way with me, turns me over his knee. Why don't you do that? To my everlasting shame, I should say, I was so upset with her that I accepted her invitation.
I really feel victimized, used by him. I'm a bit resentful for the treatment that I endured.
A judge for the Grievance Commission decided that Attorney Goldsboro is guilty. As for the punishment, will they give him a slap on the wrist or an old-fashioned spanking?
One footnote, during the trial, George Goldsboro claimed that one woman had been encouraged by a former partner to make the accusations. Another, he said, stood to gain financially. Next, the wild and wacky things that happened to Oscar, and later on, some very hot swimsuits.
So much of fashion has been inspired by underwear. It just seems to me natural to start swimming in those things.
On Thursday, a look back at the stories that matter to you. He's the hottest prize in Hollywood, a coveted symbol of celluloid success. But once the Oscar is won, what becomes of him? You'd be amazed. Here's Nancy Glass.
Everyone wants
It's what remains of the glamour of Hollywood.
Oscar, he's Hollywood's golden boy for a night, but after the footlights fade, sometimes he gets the boot.
Do it to him before he does it to you.
Brando was using it as a doorstop in his office. A friend said, gee, Marlon, what are you going to do with your Oscar? And the story goes, Marlon tossed it to the guy and said, here, make a lamp out of it.
As owner of a Hollywood memorabilia shop, Malcolm Willits has heard plenty of stories about poor Oscar.
This is the night of thrills in Hollywood.
Since the Academy Awards began in 1927, Oscars have been stolen, broken, and peddled to pawn shops. Gene Kelly's Oscar melted in a house fire, though he was given a new one. Art director Lyle Wheeler won for The King and I, Gone with the Wind, and other films. But in hard times, Wheeler put his Oscars into storage and didn't pay the bill.
And a couple in Long Beach bid for these boxes, not even knowing what was inside. They open up one of the boxes, and here are 5 beautiful Oscars.
When Oscar goes on sale, it's nearly always under wraps.
It's almost like dealing in drugs. The people who sell the Oscars don't want it known that they're selling the Oscars. The people who buy the Oscars from us don't want it known that they're buying them.
Willett says he sold about 20 against the wishes of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences.
The Academy says that for 9,000 years, no Oscar can be sold. It's without first offering it to the Academy for $1. 9,000 years, which I think is not too realistic.
The rule went into effect in 1950. Willett says he gets around it by handling only older Oscars or those winners already gave away.
There are people out there who want these Oscars. You might say, what do they do with them? Well, they build shrines in their home. I've seen these with spotlights. It's like an altar.
That Oscar Marlon Brando won for On the Waterfront never became a lamp. It eventually sold for $13,000. Other Oscars have brought from $4,000 to over $22,000.
No, I didn't see much of the war.
But now this man has upped the ante.
You trying to kid the Army?
No, I was stationed in the repair shop below decks.
Disabled veteran Harold Russell won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor in the 1946 film, The Best Years of Our Lives.
There it is.
At 78 and concerned about financial security, Russell is the first to auction off his own Oscar, one of a pair he won for the film.
I'll miss it. I'll miss it. But, you know, we have to make a choice. And I made that choice. We have things to do and miles to go before we say goodnight. And hopefully Oscar will be with us, in spirit anyway.
I have $35,000 bid.
The bids rose until finally an anonymous buyer set Oscar's value.
It could be a collector. It could be an investor. It could be someone who just thought that Best Years of Our Lives was the greatest movie he'd ever seen.
Once, twice, sold for $55,000.
It's the ultimate in Hollywood memorabilia, I guess. It is a very impressive statuette.
Well, the price of an Oscar keeps going up. In October, John Lennon's Oscar for the song Let It Be went on the auction block and fetched a whopping $110,000. Coming next, we'll chase the chilly winter blues with some very hot bathing suits. Steamy swimsuits in a moment, but first, here's what's upcoming on Inside Edition.
This wealthy heir to a family chain of grocery stores was in the middle of an ugly divorce. But when the battle turned deadly, Russell ran to his lawyers instead of the police. For over a day, Russell's lawyers plotted legal strategy, knowing his wife's brutal murder had gone unreported. What drove a millionaire to madness? Inside Edition investigates.
That's next time, and finally today. Calvin Klein has never been one to shy away from controversy, and he's at it again, shocking some at his recent swimsuit show. Janet Tamaro with the details.
I have a feeling about what people will either want or what they like.
Calvin Klein is the master of using sex to sell his clothes. His steamy television ads have become classics.
You want to know what comes between me and my Calvins? Nothing.
Now Klein is unleashing his sexiest work yet. In New York recently, top models showed off the hot Calvin Klein swimwear for the summer of '93.
For me, the ultimate fantasy is fashion swimwear that is really simple and modern and pure and minimal and sexy.
Sexy is right. T-backs showing lots of skin, fun polka dots, wild animal prints, and these form-fitting metallic designs that look more like sexy evening wear.
I see a lot of these swimsuits worn right into the evening under a jacket and with a pair of pants or a skirt or something, because they become fashion.
Calvin Klein's famous underwear designs are now a part of his swimwear.
So much of fashion has been inspired by underwear. It just seems to me natural to start swimming in those things.
And if you want to cover up a little, you can try Klein's accessory shells. The shells came in handy for this top model. Klein sent her out on the runway topless. You may have trouble pulling this off at your local beach.
I just think using shells as accessories, you know, it's just fun, and I think it should be fun.
So in the summer of '93, Calvin Klein will be dominating fashion once again on the beach.
And Calvin Klein says that although some of his swimwear may look like underwear, it's been specially treated to go in the water. Let's hope so. And that is it for us today. We hope you have enjoyed Inside Edition. I'm Bill O'Reilly. See you next time.